Okay, let's talk about shield designs. There's going to be more than one episode on shield designs because one of the most distinctive elements of a hoplite army are its shields, and I think on this project I now essentially have 3 hoplite armies I'm going to end up producing. There's a lot to cover on that, but at the moment I'm working on my fantasy hoplite army, my Gorgonites, and they're all going to have exactly the same shield designs. Gorgons or other monstrous visages on the shields. I've started putting in some base colours for the figures themselves. I've laid everything out so I've got all the right number of figures. I've done a little bit of basing. But in doing this I have an overlap question with the historical armies, and that's what I'm working on here. I'm sorry, I don't have any sort of video equipment or camera equipment that's good enough to really show you the detail of working on a 15mm figure. What I'm doing is modelling a 3-dimensional design onto the shields of these figures using Milliput. I've made a few different versions of these 3-dimensional designs, and these are essentially practice pieces. I need 2 fairly distinct designs for the fantasy figures. One is a large grinning face with a lolling tongue which encompasses the whole shield, and the other is the smaller face at the centre of a set of snakes, the modern conception of a Medusa, because those are the 2 designs that I'm going to be painting or using transfers to put onto the shields. Basically, like anything to do with modelling, this is a practice thing. You've just got to do it multiple times until you get reasonably good at it. So in some cases here, I'm applying the Milliput, building up a design, then I'm scraping it back off and starting again until I've got essentially 6 figures I am happy with 3D shields. That'll mean enough to have one figure with a 3D shield on each base of hoplite soldiers. Which brings me to the historical question. Did hoplite shields have 3-dimensional designs on them? Greek vase paintings show these kinds of 3-dimensional designs. Snakes leaping from the surface of the shield to strike at the opponent, roaring lions, the face of satyrs. They're not common and they're not universal. Not every type of design is shown in 3D, but they are definitely there in the artistic depiction, and that raises the question, is there a reality that the artists are actually trying to represent, or is this purely an artistic convention, something that only exists in vase painting? It's reasonable to think that shields may indeed have had 3-dimensional designs of some sort, at least in the sense of the bronze covers being embossed in some way. In the 5th century Athenian play, 7 Against Thebes, there are several descriptions of shields, and the last of them runs like this. He holds a brand new circular shield, displaying 2 shapes skillfully attached, a man in armour made of hammered gold, behind a woman calmly leading him. She claims to be a figure of justice, to judge from what the letters say. That seems to imply a degree of 3-dimensionality with different layered pieces of engraved or embossed metal attached to the surface of the shield. And there's good reason to think that that's not entirely disconnected from the reality of bronze coverings on shields. There's 2 famous examples, which I'm illustrating here. On the left, a shield captured at Sphacteria. It's heavily reconstructed, but it's clear there's some sort of engraving on it. And on the right is a shield blazon from Olympia, which must have stood proud on its original shield. Featuring, of course, a Gorgonon in the centre. This, by the way, is why I have a serious problem with the depiction you often find in wargames books in which you get a flat bronze surface with a painted design on it. The bronze is itself decorative. You would emboss or chase it. If you're planning to use paint, why waste the expense of having a bronze surface to work on? That feels like a modern aesthetic, not an ancient Hellenistic one. Obviously, I don't have any real way of resolving this problem at the moment, so my fantasy army is a good place to practice 3D shields while I decide if they will form any part of my historic armies. All of which made me think of the leitmotif of the series, which is about the relationship between historical research and miniature wargames. When wargamers say research, they usually mean in the sense of reading stuff rather than doing what a researcher does. But it occurred to me when I was thinking about this, they often mean reading the wrong thing. I spend 90% of my time with miniature wargames on the visual appearance of the troops. I'm not designing rules most of the time. Yes, I spend some time on the order of battle or the battle itself, but most of the time I spend is painting or modelling or picking out which manufacturer has the design of figure that I feel is most appropriate visually for what I want to do. And the shield designs is obviously a big part of that. At the moment, I'm terribly concerned, for example, with how long the spears should be, because I'm fixing brass spears onto all my minifigs. I'm probably going to go with 2 to 2.5 metres, but because wooden shafts don't survive, I'm essentially making that up for convenience rather than basing on historical information. The point is that miniature wargamers, when they do read military history, but they then spend most of their time on stuff that is actually the province of the art historian. Wargames Illustrated would be far better served, for example, with a review of Thane's recent study on ekphrastic shields than, say, Osprey's latest offering on Spartan warfare, especially given how much more expensive Routledge volumes are. I'm not springing £110 to check this one out myself. Anyway, for now, back to drilling holes in the hands of minifigs, and I'll update you soon on the various hoplite armies.